Well, I'm outside the federal court building here in New York City, where P. Diddy has just been sentenced to 50 months in prison. So that's 4 years and 2 months in prison. He'll also have to serve 5 years of supervised release and pay a fine of $500,000. And that's related to his prostitution-related offences that he was found guilty of at trial a couple of months ago. Offences relating to his freak-offs, or hotel nights as he called them, with his former girlfriends and male escorts. We heard from the music mogul for the first time today. He addressed the court, pleading with the judge for mercy, to give him a second chance, apologising to his victims and describing his actions as disgusting, shameful and sick. We also heard from his 6 adult children who, many of them in tears, also asked the judge to give their dad a second chance, saying that he is a changed man. But the judge said that his crimes were so serious that they deserved hard prison time. And once the sentence was read out, the music mogul turned to his children and his mother in the back of the court, tapped his heart and said, "I'm sorry, I love you."
The gavel dropped and the world held its breath. After nearly 2 years of mansion raids, headlines, and endless speculation, Sean Diddy Combs finally learned his fate: 4 years in federal prison.
Sean Diddy Combs was stoic as the judge handed down his 50-month sentence. That's more than 4 years. Now, Sean Combs, from my observation sitting inside that courtroom, did not have much of a reaction as his fate was handed down to him. It was actually moments before that he got emotional, crying when he spoke to the judge, which was the first time that he had addressed the court at length throughout his entire 2-month trial. Now, he faced his children and he said, "I am sorry, I have failed you as a father." He then looked at his mother sitting in the gallery of the courtroom and said, "You raised me better than this." And that is when his voice was cracking and when he began to cry. Now, Sean Combs' attorneys took a very long time with the sentencing proceedings today. 5 of his attorneys speaking at length to the judge, talking about how he is a changed man, how he is a man who suffered from drug abuse, but that he has a lot of good to offer the world. In fact, one of his attorneys saying that the world needs Sean Combs. Another one of his attorneys crying as she told the judge that she herself was inspired by Sean Combs. Now, despite the defense's efforts, the judge said that, of course, he was taking that into consideration and that he agreed with his attorneys that he has made great impact on the world as a self-made businessman who has inspired so many, particularly the Black community. But here's what the judge said when he scolded Combs. He said, quote, "History of good work cannot wash away this case." He said that he used his abuse to get your way. He asked Combs, why did the abuse continue for so long, that being the abuse against Cassie and Jane? And he said, quote, "Because you had the power and resources to keep it going and you didn't get caught."
The defense had begged for time served, painting him as a changed man. Prosecutors demanded 11 years, pointing to decades of abuse. Judge Aaron Subramanian cut down the middle, declaring that 50 months behind bars was serious, but not the maximum. It was both mercy and condemnation wrapped in one. In that courtroom, the spectacle was surreal. Diddy, once untouchable, once commanding stages and empires, was reduced to tears. He wept, pleaded, begged. The silence in the room made every sob echo louder. For the first time, he sat alone. No entourage, no music, no power. Just a man waiting to be locked away. The judge's words cut through. "This is a hard time away from family. But you will still have life after prison." It was a reminder that others, like Cassie, had lost years they could never get back. Her victim impact statement, described as haunting, carried enormous weight. "His violence still echoes in my life," she wrote. That letter, according to insiders, tipped the scales. Prosecutors piled on evidence. Yes, even the infamous golf tapes that captured degrading abuse. The defense tried one last card, citing Diddy's bipolar disorder, but the judge was unmoved. Accountability mattered more than diagnosis. As the sentence landed, reactions split like a fault line. Victims said the decision at least acknowledged the truth.
Sean Diddy Combs has been sentenced to 50 months in prison. Combs was sentenced to what Judge Arun Subramanian said was significant time. He was sentenced for prostitution-related offenses after his conviction in July in a case that ended in a split verdict. Combs was acquitted of the more serious charges of sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy that could have landed him behind bars for the rest of his life. Prosecutors had called for a sentence of more than 11 years. Combs' lawyers wanted him released almost immediately. Judge Arun Subramanian issuing his sentence after hearing directly from Combs. Combs said that he expresses remorse to his victims and that he is a changed man, that being in jail for the last year or so has allowed him to kick alcohol and drugs, and that when he gets out of prison, he wants to share that message with others.
Supporters hailed it as long overdue justice. Critics scoffed that 4 years was far too little for decades of damage. Outside the courthouse, his family smiled faintly. But inside the industry, a cultural reckoning had begun. Because if Diddy could fall, who might be next? The courtroom shifted in mood when Diddy's children rose one by one.
A judge has just sentenced Combs to 4 years and 2 months in federal prison, and it's likely that he's going to get time served, which would mean that that's 50 months minus 13. So he will serve perhaps like a little over 3 years in prison, and again, he gets a little bit of time off for good behavior. Combs seemed unemotional when the judge decided his sentence. It was a really emotional day. Combs was crying as his children were up there speaking before the judge. 6 of his children spoke, telling the judge what their father means to them and how they really just want their father home, and his twin daughters talking about the death of Kim Porter, their mother, and saying that they've already lost a mother and now they've lost his father. The judge also directly addressing Sean Combs. He said, I know you feel like you're in a dark place, that your children depended on you, but he said to him directly, you are going to get through this. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and he said that you have an opportunity to right your wrongs and a true path to redemption.
Their voices shook, but their words were sharp, aimed directly at the heart of Judge Subramanian. Quincy went first, insisting his father had transformed, a man reborn after mistakes. Justin called his father his superhero. Christian, dressed in black, declared he was his father's twin in spirit. And Jessie, still raw from losing her mother, Kim Porter, reminded the judge of nights when Diddy was the only thing holding them together. Even the youngest, Delilah, begged, her words trembling, "Please don't leave us fatherless." Chance added that their father now spoke with a clear mind, painting a picture of healing and redemption. For a brief moment, the courtroom felt like a family gathering rather than a sentencing. The judge nodded, thanked them for honesty, but kept his face unreadable. When the children walked out, cameras caught something strange. Smiles. Smiles that didn't match the gravity of the day. Reports noted Diddy didn't even turn to look at them. Was this love or strategy? Critics whispered the children weren't speaking freely. They were props in a play designed to win mercy. The defense leaned hard into that image. They showed an emotional montage of Diddy with his kids.
George, come out, get on it, get on it. How are you feeling today?
Attorneys framed him as a cultural pioneer, even a civil rights leader who lowered barriers in hip-hop. Inmates, 15 of them, submitted letters praising his mentorship behind bars, but authenticity heavily questioned. Meanwhile, Dana Tran, mother of Diddy's youngest, buried her head in her hands. The defense table wept openly. Lawyers called it a family environment. Yet when the verdict came, Diddy barely looked at them. For victims, the display only deepened the wound. Family loyalty, they argued, could never erase the trauma of what happened behind closed doors. The ink on the judge's ruling was barely dry when 50 Cent made his move. Not just a tweet, not a post. He had written a letter directly to the judge weeks before sentencing. In it, he painted Diddy as a predator who had threatened him for years, a man who, in his words, was still unrepentant and violent. He even tied his plea to the controversy surrounding Daphne Joy, stressing that this wasn't personal beef, it was about public safety. And he wasn't alone.
The moment that we have all been waiting for, Sean Combs' former girlfriend Cassie Ventura, the government's star witness, finally taking the stand. I was in the courtroom, and I'm actually going to read some of my notes so that I get it accurate for you guys. She talked about how she met Combs when she was just a teen, pretty much. She was just getting into the music industry, and that when she met Combs, he was really looking out for her. But then she said that on her 21st birthday is when he kissed her for the first time, and then they eventually went on to fall in love, and they were together in this relationship for about a decade. She said that early on in the relationship, Combs introduced her to the idea of a threesome, which eventually became known as freak-offs. She said that as part of these freak-offs, she was told by Combs to allegedly hire male escorts to take part in these drug-fueled parties with a lot of baby oil. We heard a lot about baby oil today and Astroglide, and that they would use like 10 bottles for these freak-offs, and sometimes they would run out of baby oil and have to hurry and get more because Combs wanted her and the escort to be glistening and to be shimmering, and didn't want their bodies to be dry. She said that she would participate in these freak-offs against her will, but that she didn't want to vocalize it too much to Combs because he would allegedly be violent. She goes on to talk about taking drugs and being so high during these freak-offs that, she really sometimes didn't even know what was happening, and that some of these freak-offs would last days, and that early on in their relationship, these freak-offs were happening weekly. At one point, she did start crying, but she was crying when reminiscing on her relationship with Combs, and Cassie's husband, Alex Fine, was in there as well. This testimony is expected to last multiple days, and she'll be back on the stand tomorrow.
Cassie's letter, already haunting in its detail, carried the weight of years spent in fear. She admitted she's still worried about retribution, even after speaking out. Her lawyers called the sentence a recognition of trauma. But to Cassie, it was more than legal language, it was survival. Other women echoed her pain. Former sex workers stepped forward, confirming the same dark experiences she described. Aubrey O'Day, once a bright young starlet under Diddy's wing, issued a stark warning: your dreams aren't worth the abuse. She urged young artists to walk away before they were consumed. Her words cut deep, not only because of her story, but because of the industry's silence she accused of protecting Diddy all these years. Victims regretted signing NDAs that muzzled them, but some still spoke. One witness said the sentence, though short, finally brought closure. A former detective recalled files gone missing, evidence mysteriously lost, bribes whispered but never proven. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Online, fans argued furiously. Was 4 years justice or a gift? Some said Diddy was lucky it wasn't 11. Victims' families felt relief, but not satisfaction. And inside the music world, whispers grew louder. Kid Cudi was praised for his loyalty, while insiders hinted this was only the beginning. The question became unavoidable. If Diddy could fall, who's next? Inside that packed courtroom, the world saw a different Diddy. Gone was the swagger. He stood before the judge, begging for mercy. He called himself a changed man, apologizing for years of selfishness and excess. He blamed drugs, admitting they fueled his downfall. For the first time in 25 years, he claimed he was sober. The most haunting moment? He said the infamous Cassie video, replayed in his head every day. Jail, he confessed, had broken him to his core. At one point, he admitted he even thought about death while locked up. Through tears, he promised to be a better father, a better man. His defense team tried to shift the story. They painted him as a cultural giant, a man who gave hip-hop to the world, a role model in the black community. But the judge wasn't swayed. "The crimes are too serious," he said flatly. Then came the verdict: guilty on prostitution transport, but acquitted of sex trafficking and racketeering. The defense seized on that, insisting the jury had found no coercion. The judge disagreed, citing coercion over and over. Even as defense lawyers snapped back that he was acting like a 13th juror, they vowed to appeal. Still, the moment was historic. Reporters rushed to call it one of the biggest celebrity convictions in decades. Prosecutors pushed the point harder, reminding the court of a long pattern of bribery, cover-ups, and vanished evidence, like the missing gun from 1999 and the way the Shine trial was buried. This time, Cassie's testimony became the centerpiece, and jurors didn't buy the defense's claims that she was exaggerating. When the sentence was read, the judge delivered one final blow. This abuse went on because of power. Diddy collapsed to his knees, sobbing. His influence, once untouchable, had failed him. The sentence wasn't the end. Diddy now faces 5 years of supervised release after prison, plus a $500,000 fine. His lawyers are already plotting an appeal, arguing the judge went beyond what the jury actually decided. They insist the encounters were consensual. Prosecutors disagree, saying punishment was necessary and overdue. But outside the courtroom, the fears linger. Cassie has admitted she still worries about retaliation if Diddy ever walks free. Industry insiders whisper that if the unreleased tapes ever leak, it could spark a collapse far bigger than Diddy himself. Some even hint politicians might be caught up in the shadows of his empire. Critics call the silence around it all nothing short of mafia omerta. And here's the reality: Diddy might not even serve the full 4 years. With time served and good behavior, he could be out in as little as 2 to 2.5 years. There's even talk he could be moved to a softer federal camp facility. For some, that's outrage.
The judge in the Sean Diddy Combs trial has just rather shockingly denied him bail. This, of course, coming after the news that the jury convicted him of 2 of the lesser charges in the government's case against him, finding him not guilty of the 3 biggest and most consequential charges. Laura, this is a surprising development. What are we learning? What are the judges?
Victims say the sentence feels light. Experts agree, calling it lenient given the decades of allegations. Judge Greg Mathis even went on record saying this was Diddy's second chance. But the bigger question is, will he use it? Public opinion is split. Some fans believe prison will humble him. Others say he'll adapt quickly, charm guards, and keep his empire alive from behind bars. Many wonder if his billions saved him yet again. His defense team may have fumbled the mental health argument, failing to fully use his bipolar diagnosis as a plea for compassion. The judge chose punishment over rehab, and so the stage is set. The question hanging over everything is simple but chilling. When Diddy walks free, will he rise again, or collapse for good?